Hello everyone, and full disclosure, the recording for the webinar didn't work. It exported and crashed, and so I'm going to record this by myself and pretend all 50 of you are still there. So my name is Will Taylor, and thank you for watching this. Hello to those of you I know, and welcome to those of you who I've never met. So I've got a confession to make before we begin. I do not attend health and safety webinars anymore, quite simply because I am bored, sick, tired of the 15-minute introduction and sales pitch. So if you're okay with that, I'm going to forego that. And if anyone does want to speak to me about my health and safety training, face-to-face training, virtual training, video, e-learning, IOSH and NEBOSH, and so on, we can do that privately outside of this webinar. So let's get stuck into it, shall we? If that's fair enough. So, a couple of things I want to share with you today, and well, why am I doing this? First of all, is that I thought everyone did this. I assumed that everyone knew what I'm about to tell you, and it's only after delivering a course at a large housing association in London, a very bespoke incident investigation course, I came across 15 health and safety professionals, experienced people who just didn't know any of this stuff. And so I thought, well, maybe I should do a webinar to explain this to other people. Maybe that would be useful. So two things that we're going to get into. First of all, I want to see if I can help you reduce the chances of you getting an enforcement investigation when you submit a RIDDOR report. And to help you do that, basically, I'm going to reveal what investigations are mandatory. So which incidents require a mandatory investigation, generally speaking, and therefore I'll reveal which ones don't. Secondly, the HSE can decide not to investigate if they have justification not to. And I'm going to reveal to you the criteria that an incident has to meet for them to decide not to bother. And then I'm going to link all of this to the online RIDDOR report and explain how you can fill that online RIDDOR report in such a way that you could possibly deter the HSE or the local authority inspector from visiting you. The second part of this presentation will give tips on how you might be able to influence the enforcement inspector when they turn up. And so how could you possibly sway them, influence them so that they give you the benefit of the doubt? Now, full disclaimer here, there is absolutely no guarantee of success with these strategies. It depends on a lot of different things. It depends on the incident, it depends on the circumstances, it depends on the inspector, the region that you are in. And so these tips may work sometimes. But if you use them all of the time, and let's say you're able to eliminate 10 to 15% or 20% of your investigations and interactions with the HSE, if you did that over your entire career, what would the impact be for you? It would certainly be something quite positive. I also want to say before we get into this, a quick mention of ethics. To be clear, nothing that I say in this presentation should be interpreted as an encouragement to lie, to exaggerate, or to massage the truth with your RIDDOR reports or anything else that you say to the enforcement agency. We tell the truth, we do not lie. That's not just a legal requirement, it's also a moral requirement and probably a requirement of our IOSH code of conduct as well. In fact, we're going to do the opposite, the entire opposite. We are actually going to be more truthful. We're going to give more details, very specifics to show inspectors that this incident did not meet the incident selection criteria. So in fact, we're going to do the entire opposite of lying. So part one is how do we reduce the chances of an investigation? So the first point I'd like to make is that the HSE are busy. They're really busy. They've been busy for years, but prosecutions are falling, inspections are falling. COVID has added to that because now they're having to do COVID checks, which means they've got less resources for other things. There've been budget cuts over the past 10 years. Their budget is 32% lower than it was 10 years ago. And there are shortages of HSE inspectors. And according to the non-executive director, Kevin Rowan, companies are now more likely to be visited by an insolvency service officer than a HSE inspector. And it is estimated that there are 300 fewer inspectors than there were in 2010. So what does this mean? It means that inspectors have to prioritize. means they have to pick and choose which RIDDOR reports they act on and investigate. And so when it lands on their desk, whether it's HSE, LA, or the Fire and Rescue Service, they have to decide whether to investigate or not, according to criteria. They have what we call incident selection criteria. And so what we write on the report is basically is going to help them decide whether to investigate. And if you write the right things on that report, that may cause the inspector to not investigate your incident. And just to re-emphasize this, you'll find references to everything that I'm saying on the HSE website. I mean, I'm not making this up. And if you don't believe me, you can follow these links in this document, go on the HSE website and read this for yourself. And so you'll see there's a reference here that says that the grounds for not investigating an incident which would normally be investigated is inadequate resources due to other priorities. And I do wonder, what other priorities? Well, COVID perhaps? COVID? So the question I've always asked myself, and what I would like to put to you today is it possible to nudge a busy, overworked inspector away from investigating our particular incident? I'd like to suggest to you that yes, it is possible in some cases to do that. So RIDDOR, you are submitting a RIDDOR report. You're submitting a report for one of these things. I'm sure you're familiar with this list. You have to report fatalities, specified injuries, diseases, dangerous occurrences, and so on. But not all of these actually require an investigation. Not all of these meet the incident selection criteria. These incidents meet the incident selection criteria. So fatalities must be investigated, obviously. Diseases, the occupational diseases, must be investigated. Generally speaking, there may be exceptions to that. Many of the specified injuries need to be investigated. Many, not all of them, and we'll have a look at that. And when it comes to incidents, like dangerous occurrences and any other type of incident, incidents which indicate a likelihood of serious breach of the law will require an investigation. So we're going to focus on these two things to begin with. The specified injuries. So which specified injuries need to be investigated? Well, here's a list which you will find in quite a few locations on the HSE website. And I'd like to draw your attention to A, B, and C. A, B, and C, because they are different to the list of specified injuries in the RIDDOR legislation. So it doesn't say broken bones or fracture or chips to the bones or anything like that. It says serious multiple fractures, more than one bone, not including the wrist or the ankle. So that means if someone breaks a foot, it doesn't meet the incident selection criteria. If someone breaks a foot and an ankle, it doesn't meet the criteria. If someone breaks a leg and an ankle and a foot, then that might meet the criteria. Amputations, well, amputations up to the first knuckle, i.e. just the tip of the finger, that does not meet the incident selection criteria. So that would not require an investigation. Usually, I mean, they can investigate if they want to, if they've got the time and they think there's been a serious breach of the law, but it doesn't necessarily meet the criteria. Permanent blinding in one or both eyes. You should note that it's permanent blinding, not a reduction in sight. So a reduction in sight is not does not require an investigation. So just to summarize, which RIDDOR investigations are not mandatory? Which ones do not meet the criteria? Well, 7-day injuries. That's not on the list. Tips of fingers and thumbs that are amputated below the first knuckle, not on the list. One bone broken, not on the list. And wrists and ankles are not counted either. So if they break a wrist and another bone, then that only counts as one bone. And then the permanent reduction in sight rather than blinding. And finally, incidents which indicate no serious breach of health and safety law. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So my first actionable tip for you is this. If you think that your incident does not meet the incident selection criteria, then say so on your incident report. Show it. Show that it does not meet the criteria. I mean, don't say explicitly it does not meet the criteria. That might be construed as tried to manipulate them, but say something very specific. That's all you have to do. Just be specific about the injury. State exactly which bones are broken. Don't just say they broke their leg. Say, or they broke their arm. Say they broke one wrist bone and one forearm bone. That, for me, what I've always done is the very first thing that I write in the description of the incident is a description of the injury in detail. And I wouldn't write they chopped off part of their finger. I would say only the tip of the finger was amputated and it was below the first knuckle. And I'm hoping that if you write that, the inspector will read it and straight away will think, that's not serious enough to meet the criteria. I don't need to investigate that one. Now, where do you put this on the report? Well, at the end of the RIDDOR report, there's some drop-down boxes where you can select the type of injury and the body part that was injured. And unfortunately, there is nowhere there to put down things like it was only the fingertip, or it was the wrist bone and the forearm bone. There's just no way of putting it. All you can select is bone fracture, several locations. It's very vague. So what I would do is I would type the information in here, in the box relating to the incident itself. And it says, describe what happened, give as much detail as you can, including the events that led to the incident, and describe any action taken to prevent similar incidents occurring. So describe what happened, give as much detail. So the first thing to say is, what exactly the injury was, and show them and it doesn't meet the selection criteria. And again, if that is true, be truthful, of course. Moving on to what would justify not investigating an incident if they were required to? Well, again, in the HSE's investigation procedure, freely available on their website, there is a document which has this text here, factors weighing against investigation. The grounds for not investigating incidents that meet the selection criteria are where, and please take a look at that last bullet point, it is clear that all reasonably practicable precautions were in place at the time of the incident to reduce the risk of it occurring. So my second actionable tip for today is show that everything reasonable was done. Write a long list of all of the control measures that were in place. Again, be truthful, no lies, no exaggeration, but write as long a list as you can to try and persuade the inspector that you did a lot. You did more than enough to prevent this from happening in the first place. And even better, take it a little bit further, refer to the ACOPS and the HSG guidance documents. So if you have an ACOP HSG guidance document which is relevant, set out what those documents require and then explain that you did everything that was required. You say, sorry, it requires this and we did that. It requires this and we did that, and so on. Make that a lengthy explanation. And again, you can put all those details here in that page. The last point I'd like to make on this is that inadequate resources are a potential reason for not investigating. And here we have the document which applies to local authorities and how local authorities decide whether or not to investigate. And right at the very bottom, it says inadequate resources due to other priorities. And the question I would put to you is can you, the way that you phrase your RIDDOR report, can you make your incident seem like a lower priority compared to other incidents? Well, depending on the incident, you might be able to do that. Again, being truthful. So my final tip on this in this section is, and I would use this with care. This comes with a warning, and I'll explain why in a moment. The tip I would give is, if everything reasonably practicable was not done, so let's say that, there was room for improvement, there are some failings here, I would include details of all of the actions that you are going to take to prevent reoccurrence. Show them that you are taking this very seriously. Show them that you have everything in hand to prevent reoccurrence, and they may decide that, that you've got everything in hand and they don't need to attend. Now, please be careful here. Those of you who are legally inclined will recognize that there is a danger that you might accidentally admit guilt here. And so avoid admitting that you broke the law. Avoid admitting that you did not do everything reasonably practicable, because then, well, that would be a very easy improvement notice or even a prosecution and so on. So that's best avoided. But just say, right, we've done a lot. Here are all the things we've done, and clearly those haven't quite worked because we've had this incident, so we're going to go further and take the following actions. And this works this does work. I've been very fortunate this week because I've witnessed a HSE inspection. I was delivering training for a client just this week, and on Tuesday, the HSE turned up out of the blue. Surprise inspection. I'm delivering training in the boardroom. They're down in reception. They speak to the ops director, and it was squeaky bum time because the ops director knew that things weren't perfect. Hence why I was delivering training, was to help the organisation fix things. And anyway, so the inspector has to look at the risk assessments, one of the first things they ask for usually. And the first thing the ops director said is, I'm going to warn you now, the risk assessment's not very good. We are aware that they are not very good. You know, I've been here a year. We've put in place a plan to improve our safety standards. We're employing a health and safety advisor from next month. You know, here's proof. And we're currently doing our third IOSH Managing Safely training right now in the room next door. So we're investing heavily in this, and we're fully committed to improving these things. And so he was able to set out the improvements in the plan. And yeah, he honestly expected to get 2, probably 3 improvement notices because there's issues of risk assessments, there's issues of cost assessments, there were guarding issues on machines. And as it turns out, the inspector didn't take any of those, didn't take action really. Just wrote a letter, said they will write a letter with advice. Obviously, that's chargeable with the fees for intervention, but it's a hell of a lot better than being subjected to an improvement notice, which requires you to do things within a matter of weeks, instead of maybe the months that they will be taking. So showing that you have a plan in place really does work. Moving on to part 2, and you might remember this chap here if you've watched the TV show Phoenix Nights. This is Keith Lard. He's a fire inspector in Phoenix Nights. He's a bit of a prat, and he likes dogs far too much. Anyway, despite all of your efforts, the enforcement inspector might visit. And so I wanted to talk about how do you reduce the chances of this person taking enforcement action against you. Now, this applies to all enforcement inspectors. Could be the Environment Agency, the Fire and Rescue Service, local authority, and the HSE. And they might be visiting for any reason. You know, it could be an investigation from a RIDDOR report, but it could also be a tip-off. Someone's blown the whistle. Could be an inspection, campaign, or report from another agency. And as for tip-offs, some years ago, I was working in an organization where we purchased another factory. And so we were brand new there. And on my second visit to that factory, we had a surprise inspection by the HSE. This young lady turned up, and she'd been tipped off. They'd actually been tipped off by disgruntled employees who weren't happy with the redundancy process that we were about to go through. Anyway, I greeted her, and I used all of the techniques that I'm about to talk about right now. And as soon as she walked onto the factory floor, she saw the problem, which I was well aware of, and I was in the process of trying to fix it. But basically, there were lots of basically large podium steps, large like gantries that had been built that people were stood on, a good 2 meters off the ground. And they didn't have any guardrails whatsoever, just complete flat, open edge. And they were working at heights, lots of people on these platforms all over the shop floor. And as soon as she saw it, her eyes just opened, and she said, well, you know, that's a serious imminent danger. And she started to issue a prohibition notice. And I was able to stall her and say, basically, if you please just give me 1 hour. 1 hour. You can have a look at all the other stuff where you like, but just give me 1 hour. I am in the process of fixing this right now. In 1 hour, I can get all these things guarded. And I knew that in the warehouse, we had all the parts because these were things that you could build, you know, like Lego. And it took a little bit longer than that. It took 90 minutes. But 90 minutes later, we'd managed to cobble together guardrails, which, well, it was a bit jerry-rigged, but it was sufficient. It was sufficient for her to be to not issue a prohibition notice. So we got away with that one. So, you know, I'm going to talk about how I did that. A standard visit kind of looks a little bit like this. So they might warn you that they're coming with a letter, or they may just turn up. When they turn up, greet them and make sure you get ID. I did once have someone try to blag their way on site, trying to persuade me that they were from the HSE. So check something called the warrant card. They should have a warrant card with them. They'll want to speak to relevant managers, senior managers usually, ops director, ops manager, site manager, that kind of person. And they'll usually ask for documentation like risk assessments, policy, things like that. And then they'll want to walk around and see what you do. And while they're doing that, they'll want to speak to people. Safety reps are usually a good choice, or other staff or anyone else. And then they will inform you of the outcome of their visit. Now, what I'm going to talk about here is, and there are lots of things we could say about how you handle inspectors, but I'm going to focus on one thing, and that is building rapport with this inspector, building a relationship in the very short space of time that you are with them. And this is a transferable skill. What I would say is this: if you can build rapport with the inspector, if you can get them to warm to you, or at the very least, don't get them to dislike you, because if they dislike you, they're probably not going to give you the benefit of the doubt if there is doubt on what to do. But if they do like you, if they've warmed to you, then they might be inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt and either not take action or might reduce the action, choose the lesser of two actions. Now, again, there's no guarantee that this will work, because there will be some situations where it's just black and white. If you are breaking the law and it's a serious breach of the legislation, then chances are it doesn't matter what rapport you've got with them, they're going to take the necessary action, especially if it's in the public interest. On the other hand, if everything's fine and you're going above and beyond what the law requires, then you don't really need rapport. They can't do you if you're not breaking the law. Where this is going to help is if you are in between somewhere, if you're in the grey zone. And there are times when there's a grey area. There are times when the law has to be interpreted, where the guidance is not clear, where it's not clear that taking action would be in the public interest. And so that's where building rapport is going to help. And so just as an example, I once had a fire and rescue inspector visit one of my sites to do a standard audit. And during the audit, he asked for the training records on fire extinguishers, which I didn't have. The reason I didn't have them is because our insurance company had told us, we don't want you to train people to use extinguishers because that's dangerous and it could lead to an employee liability claim. So we'd rather just they leave the building. So we deliberately chose not to train people. And all of our fire action notices on the walls said, do not attempt to fight the fire under any circumstances. So we did have extinguishers, but they were just for show. I explained all of this, and he said, well, I'm afraid your insurance company doesn't decide what the law is. The regulatory reform fire safety order requires that you provide training in the use of fire extinguishers. And well, I'll tell you what happened in a moment and how I wriggled out a bad one, but I essentially managed to persuade him that that's not what the law required at all. And I won that argument. Now, how do we start with this? Well, it starts with attitude. You have to approach people with the right attitude. Say to yourself, it's good that they are here. It's good the HSE or the Fire Rescue Service have turned up. There is a silver lining. Now, what's the silver lining? Well, I'll tell you what, it's a win-win when the HSE turn up. So if the HSE turn up and they take no action, they leave very happy, brilliant. You can tell your boss and a management team that after all your hard work, the HSE were very happy, took no action. Pat on the back, you are a hero. And then you can tell all of the other managers, the team leaders, the supervisors, you can say, absolutely champion, everyone. Well done, everyone. Thanks to all your efforts in keeping this place safe on a day-to-day basis, the HSE have walked out very impressed. So you can use it for your positive reinforcement. That's fantastic. And it's also brilliant if they take action against you. It's wonderful. They serve an improvement notice. Wonderful. Because now you have ammunition to negotiate with management the improvements that you need to make to drive performance forward. You've probably been asking for stuff and they've been saying no. And all of a sudden the HSE come in and serve an improvement notice or a prohibition notice telling you to do what you've been asking them to do. Fantastic. That's wonderful. So whichever outcome is a win-win. So it's good. HSE are here. Good. Now take that mentality, take that attitude, go to reception to greet them and welcome them. And tell them, I literally say, oh, I'm glad that you're here. I'm grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that you're here. Wonderful. I'd love to show you around. Absolutely love to show you around. And then the next thing that I say is, oh, I'd love to pick your brains on what else we can do to do even better. Oh, we've got a few issues that I wouldn't mind showing you to get your input. Really, a few things I'm concerned about, and I want to check if I'm right to be concerned or not. Yeah, so just tell them that you want their input. Tell them that you're interested in what they think. Now, let's just put this into perspective. Yeah, because you might think, wow, this is a bit cheesy, isn't it? No, put yourself in the shoes of the HSE inspector. They visit a lot of sites, they investigate things. What do they get greeted with? Blank stares, terror, disgruntlement, managers who don't come straight away, leave them hanging around in the reception. Some people just obnoxious and abusive. All of a sudden you come along, you're like, oh, hello, wonderful, so glad you're here. So much to show you, so much to show you. Love to pick your brain. They're thinking, oh, wow, this is nice. He's signed in, inducted, things are taken seriously. You offer them a tea or a coffee, a drink, and so on. Now, the next thing I would say is this. Don't try to take over the visit. Acknowledge their authority and tell them it's their visit and you'll take them wherever they want to go. Say, oh, there's loads of things I'd love to show you. I'd love to pick your brains. Well, it's your visit. You're in charge. You're the HSE inspector. What are you here to see? What would you like to do first? Yeah, and so acknowledge that, and they'll probably start to warm to you. Now, on your way around or whilst you're looking through the paperwork, you may come across a problem. And here's the key thing: when you come across a problem, a health and safety problem, and they say, right, this is not good, express as much agreement as you can. Very importantly, do not argue. Do not argue. Don't get into an argument. Because arguing damages rapport. We don't like people who argue with us, and you know that because you've been on social media, LinkedIn, you've butted heads with people before. The moment someone starts to argue with them, you like them less. And if you don't like them, you're not going to give them the benefit of the doubt. So we want to come across as agreeable as we can. And well, we're going to try to agree with them as much as we can. Now, sometimes you can't agree with what they say. They might accuse you of breaking the law when you're not, and so on. But we're going to try and agree as much as we can. What does that mean? Well, it means that wherever possible, we're going to avoid this I disagree attitude. We're never going to say, no, I disagree. No. Yeah, but that's not right. That's not true. That's unfair. We're going to avoid that because that is arguing and that destroys rapport. Ideally, we want to be on the other end. We want to be saying, yes, I completely agree. Because complete agreement, it builds rapport, it reinforces rapport and warmth, and they're more likely to like you. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes sometimes you can only validate what they say. So it's like partial agreement. You could say, listen, I see your point. I see your point. It's a little bit like saying, I agree to disagree. Although I would eliminate that from your vocabulary because there's nothing more patronizing than that phrase. Everyone hates that when they hear it. But you say, oh, I see your point. Never thought about it that way. Well spotted. Oh, good argument. I like that. Yeah. So you don't have to agree with what they say, but you could agree that it is a valid way of looking at things. That you agree that they're kind of entitled to their point of view, and their point of view is entirely valid. Now, sometimes you may have to disagree. And so here's one final tip on this. Disagree while sounding agreeable. You've got to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. And this is what I did with that fire and rescue inspector who wanted the training records for the fire extinguishers. There was a very simple thing that I did. I replaced the word but with and. It's a very simple tip, this. And it is so powerful. And it is so effective, and this can transform your arguments with people. And so let me give you some examples of how this might work. Let's say someone says, I see what you're saying, but our risk assessment concluded it would be unreasonable for us to do that. Just change that one word, and what you'll notice is that your attitude changes, your tone of voice changes, and you sound a lot more agreeable and a lot more open. You might say, I see what you're saying, and our risk assessment concluded that it would be unreasonable for us to do that. I've said the same thing. It's the exact same thing. But instead of a but, I've said and. Which one sounds more agreeable to you? It's probably the and, isn't it? Let's have another look at this one. I'm aware of what the guidance says, but I don't believe this guidance is relevant to this situation. Sounds like an argument, doesn't it? But you say, I'm aware of what the guidance says, and I don't believe the guidance is relevant to this situation. Which one sounds more agreeable? See, the word but distracts attention from what you just said. You could say, I agree with you, but this. It focuses all their attention on the negative bit you say afterwards. So it's almost as if you didn't say the agreement. It's gone, it's disappeared, deleted. And yeah, and it just sounds like an argument. It deletes the agreement you just said and focuses attention. Whereas the word the and does the opposite. It accepts, it acknowledges that first bit. It says, yeah, I agree with you. And that being true, and I also think this. I add to what you've said. I'm not deleting it. I'm not discounting it. I add to what you've just said. So yeah, I take that and I accept that. And let me just add this to the point as well. And it makes it sound almost like an agreement, like a discussion, an exchange of information. Don't just use this on HSE inspectors. Use this everywhere. Practice it. Let me know how this transforms your relationships. So to summarize, because we're getting to the end of the half hour here, put effort into writing your RIDDOR description of the incident. What that means is, does it fall outside of the incident selection criteria? If it falls outside of it, make that abundantly clear. Was everything reasonable done? Did you do everything that the ACOP HSG guidance document says? If so, make that abundantly clear. Spell out exactly what you did and how you complied with the law. And do you have a solid plan to prevent reoccurrence? If so, describe that plan in detail, truthfully, no lies, no exaggeration. Describe what your intentions are, and hopefully they will deprioritize your incident. Next, build rapport with the inspector. Remember, it's good that they're here. There's no bad outcome to this. Show gratitude for their visit. Welcome their inputs, acknowledge their authority, and tell them you'll take them anywhere they want to go. Don't disagree, don't argue, because if you do, and if you do disagree, do it agreeably. Practice that and instead of but. So thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, because those things are literally the most important thing that you have. I'm very happy to take questions. If you have any questions, please send me an email. And if you want to chat about health and safety, about training, or about our amazing next generation interactive video e-learning courses, or face-to-face training, if that works better for you, whatever it is, then I'll include a link in the email for you to book a chat with me, a video chat over Zoom. Or you can just drop me an email or give me a call. It's up to you. Anyway, thank you again, and I'll speak to you soon.